All right, we are live, and I'm welcome everybody to this live stream. My name is Dan Krutka, and I am really happy today to have the opportunity to talk to somebody who I've been meaning to talk to for a long time. Right? I think one of the crazy things about the online world is that we can, from a distance, kind of learn from people who they may not know all the time we're spending, but Glenn Wiebe, who we're going to have on today, has a great blog, and it's really the go-to social studies tech blog. He is, I think all the people that are really good at tech, like Glenn is, are trying stuff out, are excited about it, are sharing the stories about what you can do with it. And that's what I've been so excited with over the years. And so I've been meaning to figure out a way for us to talk, for you to join me and share a little bit. And so I'm really happy to have you today finally. So welcome, Glenn. Do you want to start by kind of telling us a little bit about your story in education and how you kind of got into this world of running this HistoryTech blog?
So yeah, we have tried to connect before. It's good to be here. And how did I get started? Holy crap. That's a great question. In my heart, Dan, I still consider myself a middle school social studies teacher. I started teaching 13-year-olds a long time ago. Trust me, I had an Apple IIe computer. It was the only one in the building. It was on a cart, floppy disks, like the original 5 1/4 floppy disks. And my very first year, I had no idea what I was going to do the first week of school. I mean, what do you know when you're a first-year teacher? You know nothing. And I was able to find in the district this game. It just was a simulation called Archaeology. That's all it was. And it was the simplest, most basic video game of all time. Keep in mind, this was in the 80s. And kids would come up and they would put in coordinates like A9, like they played Battleship. And basically you type in A9 and the computer would dig up that site to see if there was any artifacts that you would have to interpret. And eventually you would determine that this site was a New England site pre-Revolutionary War. And you had to do all this research and historical thinking, and it was awesome. And I didn't know how awesome it was at the time. But I'm telling you that this simplest, basic video game of all time sucked kids in and was incredibly engaging. And so I was convinced, even in my first couple of weeks of a teacher, that technology is a tool that we need to figure out, that video games are a good thing. So hopefully what Dan's doing in the background is giving us better internet connections. That's what I'm hoping he's doing. And so I'm going to just keep going with my story. And that is that when we use technology in appropriate ways, kids are sucked into the content. That kids love history, that they love social studies, they love maps. We just don't teach it very well sometimes. And it took me a long time to figure that out. So many years later, Dan, I'm here talking about technology and social studies and how they work together. And that's just, I just still remember that first month of school, just sort of being amazed at how engaged 13-year-old kids could get by literally walking up in groups of 4 and typing in 2 fingers A9 on a computer, and that little Apple IIe computer would chunk away and give us some results, and they'd have to go back and figure things out. So from that sort of very simple start of trying to find ways to engage kids with the content, and finding this one very simple piece of technology helped me start to realize how important those 2 things together are. And so I now work at a place called ESDAC. It's an educational service center in Hutchinson, Kansas. And my job is just to talk with other history teachers and other social studies teachers and find out what works and what doesn't work. And like you said earlier, we were talking before we came on air today, we learn the most when we talk with other teachers. And so that's why I'm excited to be here today. And that's why I had fun last night. There was 36 teachers. We spent an hour and 45 minutes talking about how to integrate literature and social studies and what technology can help us do that. And we all walked away smarter because we had the chance to talk with each other and share ideas and share resources. And that's all I'm doing. I'm talking to really smart people and sharing the conversations with other people. I really want to connect with as many different groups as possible and connect with as many different people as possible. So absolutely signing up for newsletters. And that's not really that hard to do. I mean, think of the, the big names in social studies, right? So Smithsonian, National Archives, Library of Congress, Gilder Lehrman. You can just go down the list of all the different sorts of groups that are out there. National Geographic, Economic Education, those websites that we know provide really good resources. And just find the sign me up, send me newsletters, send me emails. And I know that you think, well, wait a second, then I'm going to get all this junk mail. And no, it's not junk mail. It's coming from the National Archives. It's coming from National Geographic. Holy crap, National Geographic. The other day, I finally signed up for a couple of other newsletters. And I'm just, every day I'm getting something in my inbox that's awesome. And I'm always finding out new things, new tools, new ideas from these groups that really, that's their job, is to give us information about the tools they have and the resources they have. So that's my first suggestion. If, like, where do you find things and where do you find the resources? Sign up and have them send stuff to you. Google, we're going to talk about Google Jamboard later today. Google has, like, I don't know how many newsletters that they send out, but they have a Google education blog that I try to read or get a summary of once a week. And they're always sending me stuff. That's how I found out about Jamboard. Doing Google searches for teachers using social media like Twitter. And even if you're not, like, I know people, I don't want to get social media. I get it. I don't want to, like, have to deal with everybody, and it's a mess online, and I get it. Create an account and just follow people. Don't post, don't write anything, just follow hashtags like SS Chat, SS TLAP, Teach Like a Pirate, Ed Chat. Those are all hashtags that you can follow and do searches for, and watch those conversations. A lot of teachers share lots of really good ideas on those websites and those social media sites. And so that would be another way. And just build conversations. I know I have gotten so much smarter just following SS Chat. And Dan is one of the original, OGs, I guess, one of the original guys who just went out and created SS Chat and sschat.org and started encouraging the conversations between social studies teachers to really have conversations about what works. And so in today's world, I'm super disappointed, by the way. It's just, sorry, this is me venting a little bit. We've had a social studies PLC, middle school and high school teachers getting together for about 7 years. And this is the first year we're not able to meet face-to-face, and we're really not able to meet online in the same way. And so it's just really, for me, disappointing not to be able to have those conversations face-to-face and just talk with other social studies teachers and find out what works and what doesn't work. And that's where social media can really help. I think you make connections with other teachers and other educators just as a support system. I mean, even just to vent and go, holy crap, today was a sucky day. And all your friends are going to pop on. Yeah, it sucked for me today too, but tomorrow's going to be better. And here's a tool I'm going to try. I'm pretty excited about it. So that idea of creating your personal learning network, your own little PLC through social media and websites, I think is critical. Even talking with people down the hall. So Dan's coming and going. You're in and out. Are you in?
I think is this fixed now?
It looks so much better. You're crisp and clear, and your voice is so much better. So I don't know what you did. You went and kicked it. I don't know what you kicked. But.
Well, thank you everyone for the patience. I changed internets, I changed browsers and came back in. The second we started, everything just went out. So I have no clue what happened. But thank you for holding the show. And I think, Glenn, the tech thing that I realized we didn't do is we should have shared phone numbers so we could have texted and worked out the problem. And we didn't do that before. I usually do that. But I did hear most of what you've said. I've heard most of what you've said the whole time. I could hear you the whole time. And I really appreciate, Jeff Carpenter and I just did a live stream, and we're testing some of this out where we talked about some of our new research on developing PLNs, which you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
There's different terms, PLCs, PLNs.
Yeah.
And, one way we think of it is that, we wrote an article in Tech Trends a few years ago where we encouraged people to really, think about the online components of their PLNs, but also then how do you reflect on those to make sure you're getting what you want to get, right? So that's thinking about like the people you're interacting with online, the tech, the technologies that you're taking out of your online spaces, and then also what spaces are you in, right? And so thinking through all of those things. And some of the people I think have the strongest PLNs are the ones who are really intentional about not just being around people that think like them, but finding people who bring new things to them, right? Whether it's, people who have different life experiences from them, from different racial groups, to finding people who have tech blogs who spend a lot of time with that and being exposed to different ideas that can help you as a teacher. So I really appreciate that. So I really love your story. So tell me a little bit more about the website. So how did you get started on the website? Unless I missed it, I don't think you've talked about that. How did that start? And by the way, Glenn, I'll say your mic's rubbing a little bit on your. There you go. And so if you hold it out, maybe then you won't.
I can do that. It's a good question. I've always been sort of interested in websites and the technology. Again, going back to that floppy drive Apple IIe computer story, my very first year as a teacher, and it was during that period of time that the internet really started to take off. Keep in mind how old I am and when I started teaching. This was the 90s. And so when there was a lot of fits and starts there, but when I started working at ESDAC, and this was really almost 15, 20 years ago, we had the ability to start to create some websites and connect with teachers. And so I wanted to try that. There was I can't even remember all the different pieces of software that I've gone through to host that particular website. But we eventually walked through things like, Google Blogger was one of the things I tried. There was American AOL, some weird thing. There's so many different, and stuff like Weebly and all of these tools that were trying to make it easy for teachers. And I tried all of them, and eventually I settled on WordPress. So HistoryTech right now, and you can get to HistoryTech by going to glennwiebe.org. And I know Dan he can put a banner at the bottom, but glennwiebe.org or historytech.wordpress.org or .com. Those are all the right there. Yeah, absolutely. But the whole point of this in a lot of ways was almost for me to keep track of the stuff that I was learning. So how can I sort of record all of the conversations and keep track of the conversations I've had with really smart people? And so the idea behind the website was not so much at the beginning about other people. It was all about me. I wanted to just have a place where I could write and think and come up with ideas that I could share with other teachers. And eventually it did get some traction, and I began to realize how important that sort of conversation was for other teachers as well. And so this last year, I haven't written as much, and I'm trying to make my New Year's resolution, if there are such things, is to continue to write more at glennwiebe.org on the HistoryTech website. I need to change it to make it easier for teachers to find what they're looking for. I realized over the holiday break, there is about 3,000 blog posts. And here's the ironic thing. Here's like, and I'm just saying, I've been writing for a long time because teachers are asking me questions, and I'll go out and find stuff, or I'll learn something from somebody and go, oh my gosh, that's awesome. I need to share that out with everybody because they need to know this. I will go online and do a search like, oh, I need, somebody asked me about this. I need to go find out, what's out there. And boom, HistoryTech pops up in the top 5 search results because I've already written about it and I just forgot about it because I'm old and stupid, I guess. So the idea of HistoryTech is just a chance for me, at least at the beginning, to kind of solidify my own thinking about what's going on in the technology social studies world, because I was doing a lot of face-to-face training, and it kind of just evolved into me sharing ideas from really smart people and increasing the pool of people that I'm having a conversation with. And so that's the fun part, is just meeting somebody at a conference or meeting somebody online, and they go, yes, I read your blog all the time. And it's like, awesome. And it's not for me, right? It's for the teachers. That's my job. And I always start most of these things with the confession that I'm just such a history nerd that if I can talk with other history nerds, that's a good day. And if I can have that sort of conversation on HistoryTech at glennwiebe.org, that's another way to have conversation with other history nerds. That's also a good day. So I don't know if that helps answer the question, but it's just a lot of fun to talk about and think about what works and what's good for schools and good for kids, and makes the lives of teachers easier.
I think, Glenn, a couple of things you spoke to. One thing that really I think is important is that so often, you know, as teachers, we think about the students, right? How do we serve the students? But I think you're really, I talk to my teacher candidates that I work with a lot, that you have to be excited too, right? Like, don't forget about yourself. Like, this is, you know, and it's the kind of old missionary trope that teachers are just, you know, they're kind of see themselves as missionaries. So we don't fight for better salaries. We don't like think about ourselves. And then before you know it, you know, like a third of the field's burned out because they don't get satisfaction. And so I think a lot of exploring technology is getting excited about it. And, you know, even StreamYard, which I learned today that which browser to use it on and which one not, right? Like, I've had all kinds of fun just exploring it. There's something fun about using tech and figuring it out, right? And that can be really exciting. And this is that I told people, like, I needed a boost, and so I wanted to try something new. So I'm doing this, and I think you spoke to that. You're going on your own journey, and it certainly ends up serving students and other teachers, right? You're doing an incredible service to them, but you also are excited along the way, which is how you maintain a blog for years, right? Is that it excites you. So I'll just say, I'm going to give props to go to Glenn's site and sign up for it, right? Like, you know, I agree with you, right? We all try to reduce our inbox, and I think that's such an important thing. And, you know, when I don't have time to read a post from one of the sites I subscribe to, I don't read the post, right? I move on. But so often I go on Glenn's site and just look at, like, what's he excited about? What do I want to try out? And I ask myself, what could I use in my classes? And so you've really done a good job, and really, like I tried to say earlier, but I don't know if it came across, probably not. You know, it's probably the go-to social studies kind of tech blog, right? There's just not a lot of places that people are thinking about kind of the more practical aspects about how we use tech and thinking through that. So I love it. So do you want to talk about a little bit about some of the stuff you're excited about now? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I did get a text question. Tina, a good friend of mine, Dr. Tina Ellsworth in Olathe, Kansas. And by the way, she's a rock star all by herself.
She is. She is.
Yeah, and she's going to be doing stuff in Florida. And I sat in on some stuff she did for Oklahoma Council for the Soul Studies a couple of weeks ago. So the fact that, I don't know if Tina's still here. Maybe she'll text me. But she had a really good question. She said, and I hear this a lot, so I don't know if there's an easy answer. She asked, so if you could recommend one tool, one thing that's non-negotiable for teachers, what would it be? And it's like, oh crap, every week it's different. Every week there's something. I was like, oh no, that's what you should be doing. Do this or try this. There's always something new. But there are some. I will answer this. It's really not a tool, it's a place, and it's more than one place because I can't pick one. Sorry, Tina. There are, I'm going to just say three things. You know, I want to make sure I get the actual question correct because she will call me out on it if I don't.
And as Glenn is pulling up the question, if you leave comments in the YouTube stream, I can pull them up on the screen. So if you're logged into YouTube and you're able to leave comments, if you want to ask those questions or add comments as we continue to talk, we'd love to see those.
So she says, what's one tech tool that every social studies teacher needs to know about? And the problem with that, at least for me, is like everybody's using, like you went out and switched browsers. Everybody's using Google, or nope, we can't use Google. We're using Microsoft 360. Nope, we're not using that. We're using Canvas, or we're using something else, or we're doing, you know, everybody's different. So if I say, here's the one tech tool you need to use, somebody's going to say, well, it doesn't work for me. So I really go to like my go-to is like, if somebody asks me what I need to be doing, if I'm a social studies teacher, I say, go to the really good websites that have lots of resources. And so when we think, and in Kansas, Dan, you were a part of this a couple of years ago, and Tina's still dealing with it. I'm dealing with it. And I think Kansas has some of the best social studies standards in the country in terms of what we're asking kids and teachers to do, which is to think critically and solve problems using evidence. And so what's the one tech tool that's non-negotiable? Really 3 sites. One is the Stanford History Education Group site that basically gives teachers a couple of hundred different, very specific tools to help train their kids to think historically and use evidence. Most teachers are aware of that. I still find people who are not, which, okay, you're new, or you're just, your head's down and trying to survive and you don't know about it. But sheg.stanford.edu, I think. I always get, because I just type in Sheg and it just fills it out for me in my browser. So Dan's going to go and find that. So Sheg, Stanford History Education Group. They've got curriculum, and they got some assessments, and they got some really cool online civic literacy tools that are really powerful. I love another website called Docs Teach. That basically is the use of primary source documents, maps, photographs, stuff from the National Archives integrated into lesson plans. And so you can go out and use the ones that the National Archive experts have created, but you can also create your own, which is awesome because you can create your own account, create your own using your own sources and your own ideas. But you can also steal all of those things from everybody else. So if Dan makes a really good Docs Teach activity, I can steal it. And I use that in the most positive way possible. That smart teachers are sharing all their other things. And the third one is something called the Smithsonian Learning Lab. And I'm just blown away by the coolness of that particular website, but also the practical uses of it, which is there's about 2.5, 3 million pieces of evidence on that website. And they add to it every 7 seconds, they told me one time, on average. And it's the same way. I can create and curate and share out collections of artifacts that have questions, guiding prompts, writing prompts, thinking questions, and share those out with my students. But the same thing with Docs Teach. If I create an account and Dan has a really good collection of stuff about the Civil War, I'm going to borrow it. I'm going to favorite it. And now it's in my account, and I can edit it any way I want. So those 3 things, those 3 websites, Sheg, Docs Teach, and the Smithsonian Learning Lab, are basically just the tools that help support teachers create learning opportunities for our students.
And if I can add to what you're saying, Glenn, I think especially on Sheg has their history stuff too, but don't miss their civic online reasoning lessons there, because those are the lessons are really ready to go for you. For example, I've used in my class, they have a good Wikipedia activity, right? So many students walk into our classrooms and their other teachers have said, never use Wikipedia. And it's kind of this dishonest thing because we all use Wikipedia, right? Like we all search it. And Wikipedia is actually really rather incredible for providing really nice context on a lot of issues where it's hard to find context. And so they have, for example, it's basically helping students identify and think about different aspects of online spaces. Can I trust this tweet? Can I trust this website? You know, is this an authentic website, or is this a website that's funded by some kind of group that has a specific aim that I should be aware of? And so the Wikipedia page they have an example of is for George H.W. Bush. And you go to the site and you ask them, is this a good site, right? And so my students and I, we go through this, and it's really easy. They've got a rubric and everything set up, but I just do it as a discussion with my students. I send all my students to the site and I say, is this a credible source? And the big point that they make on civic online reasoning is you need to talk through it, right? There are more credible sources and less credible sources, but overall, right? Like if you're following someone on Twitter who is an expert in the field, you can have a little bit more confidence in their tweet. And so we don't need to say Twitter's bad. We need to say, Twitter, be more careful and cautious on Twitter, but whose tweets are you looking at? And I'll add to that too, that there's Michael Caulfield has a great method. I don't know if you know about this, Glenn, called SIFT. I don't know if you've seen his SIFT method, but that's a really nice method for teaching kind of on the spot. His big point is, I think the civic online reasoning side is really nice for kind of your traditional media literacy, right? Like, how do I know what I'm looking at and who the information is?
Right.
His is more geared towards, okay, I actually want to like change my practices and habits in my daily life. Because the lessons go out the back door of your mind when you're in the middle of searching stuff on social media and you're seeing tweets and your cognitive bias is kind of reading the tweets through that lens. And so his point is like, before I retweet, what are some really easy things I can do to say, should I retweet this, right? From like, who is this? Do I know this information? And so his SIFT method is really nice too.
Well, and speaking of the whole, Twitter and who to follow and that kind of stuff, and I mentioned Tina. Tina and I, she's still listening, so I have to be really nice to her. No, we're real good friends. I appreciate her perspective and her expertise in a lot of things, including a lot of culturally responsive pedagogy and teaching. And so in the comments, Dan, I don't know, you should be able to see that. Speaking of people to follow, Tina's an example of the kind of person, as you build your own PLN, who should you follow? How do you create that group of people that you surround yourself with, that you can borrow ideas and ask questions and share resources with, and create that back and forth? And her Twitter handle is right there that Dan shared. And so that's just the example of the kind of person that I follow, because she makes me smarter. It holds me accountable at times to doing the right kinds of things. That's my Twitter handle. So absolutely follow me if you want. You don't have to follow me. I have noticed, by the way, Dan, over the last 3 or 4 months, as I post things and write things and blog things, that I've gotten a lot of followers, but I've also lost some. And, that's okay too. We may disagree on a couple of things. I'm disappointed that we can't have those conversations.
Hey,
but
your followers may have actually just been purged from Twitter. What was it? I think it was about 70,000 accounts that were posting a lot of QAnon content actually were taken off Twitter. And so a lot of people lost followers, and some people lost a ton of followers because they tended to dabble in it themselves, right? And so then they were mad that they lost followers, and I'm like, that's why. But I don't know. I don't dabble in the Q world, and maybe that's why. I know you don't, and I know you don't.
But who knows? But see, that's the same question you were talking about, is just having those intentional conversations in your own head about who I talk to and what we talk about. And people like Nathan McAllister and Adam Toploff and Jill Weber and Derek Schutte and TJ Warsnack. And I just go down this list of really rock star teachers and educators who I follow. And seriously, just watching them do their work online and their sharing of different things makes me better at what I do. And so that's the kind of when you say, well, how do you find, and I said this earlier during the whole tech issue we were having earlier that you may or may not have heard. Where do I find stuff? What do I know what to talk about? How do I know what's good to share with other people? I talk to people like Tina and Adam and TJ and Derek and Jill and Nathan and whoever else, Emily and all the people that I follow, because if it's working for them, I know it's going to work for somebody else. And so that's where I get so much of that passion you were talking about. When I get excited is because I can see like those people are excited. They're doing cool stuff and their kids are pumped. Well, if their kids are pumped, then how come yours aren't? Because let's learn what they are teaching us. And so it's just one big happy circle of people sharing stuff and talk with other people. So making choices of who you listen to.
Absolutely. Well, so why don't you share a couple? Let's pull up your screen if that's okay with you. Why don't you share a couple of things you're excited about right now? Okay,
so I'm going to post a blog. I was hoping to get to it yesterday, but I got distracted by some other stuff. So go to glennwiebe.org later this afternoon. There'll be a new post out there. And I should have written about this particular tool earlier, and I just have been putting it off, and I don't know why, because I'm lazy and I was watching lots of football over Christmas and the holiday break. But I'm a big fan of Google, have always been a big fan of Google. And in the last 10 months, obviously, Google has saved my bacon lots of times. This particular tool called Jamboard has been around probably over 2 years. And Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and other people who are online who know more than I do about Jamboard might jump on and say, no, it started 3 years ago or whenever. I didn't start using Jamboard until about a year ago. And it came from one of those Google newsletters that I was getting. And I really fell in love with Jamboard. And I continue to find people who haven't heard about it, right? And I know how busy teachers are. So how do you find stuff? Well, you talk to other people. And so read the blog post this afternoon, but I love Google Jamboard. It's an interactive whiteboard that allows you to do so many different kinds of things. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple of some ideas. And again, I'm talking social studies, but this is the kind of stuff I think you could do no matter what content or grade you teach. Just some quick exit ticket kind of activities. This is actually, I asked some teachers, this exit ticket prompt. What do you think about media-based questions using, this is a whole nother show, Dan, about media-based questions using Google Forms to have kids do like DBQs, but embedded media like video and photos and audio clips using Google Forms. And so we talked about this, and I asked them at the end, well, what do you think? Could you use it? So I quickly made a Jamboard, posted a link to the Jamboard, and they went on the Jamboard, and they, very simply, I had pasted some images of emojis. They clicked on one of the emojis, duplicate it, they drag it, and they're voting. So you can ask your kids at the end of a lesson, end of an activity, during the middle of a lesson, just some formative feedback about what they're thinking and what their thoughts are. And I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm going to show you another one. Think about
and
the
Glenn,
idea.
I was going to let you, we're still getting your mic rubbing a little bit on your clothes.
I hate that.
I know. It's okay. I'm just letting you know.
I should have got that Yeti mic out. Then we'd been happy next time for sure. The idea of, in this case, we could do something very, very similar on a continuum. Here they had 3 choices, but I can make another sub board or another, what they call a frame, and I can draw a line across. That's not a very good line. Put a sticky note on one end and a sticky note on the other, and have teachers or kids very simply come and just make a check mark or post their own sticky or put a shape. There's lots of options on this left-hand side. So using Jamboard just as an exit ticket or as an instant poll kind of tool. I've seen teachers, we've all done that 4 corners, right? Pick the corner in the room, vote with your feet. What were the main causes of World War I? Militarism, alliances, and nationalism. There's 4. You guys out in the field, you're going to correct me, but I have 4 things that I can choose from, and in a face-to-face classroom, I'm going to have my kids get up and move from one part of the room to another. But I can also do the same thing on Jamboard by having them vote in the same way, not on a line, but drawing a check mark or put in a sticky note in one of the corners. And this could happen that fast. I mean, click of a button.
Have you primarily used this? I think one of the best things about Google Sites is they're so easily shareable. You can share and edit easily with groups. Have you used this primarily synchronously, where you're doing it at the same time, or do you see some possibilities for doing it asynchronously?
I think both. Yes, absolutely. In this situation that I just showed you in that exit ticket, it's live, right? It's right there at the same time. We're all in the same place at the same time. Maybe different parts of the world, right? Because we're on Zoom. But you can also do this as a flipped classroom activity, as homework, have kids create their own Jamboards to address a particular guiding prompt. This is one example of what I guess, in my world, a combination of both. So in this situation, we talked about white supremacy, and we looked at this particular image from the 1920s of KKK members marching down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. So this was the extension. At the end of that sort of conversation around this image, the prompt was, how has white supremacy always been part of who we are? And you can see that I've got color-coded sticky notes in that top left side. I need you as the student to respond to this before you leave today. I'm watching this part, right? And kids are pasting and creating their sticky notes and color-coding them, right? And putting them in the right places and responding to them. But what I would do after this is, like, here's the flipped classroom part. Because you have, like, here's a little sticky note with a little bit of evidence. I need more information about that. So your homework, your flipped classroom, and it could be a couple different places. I could put that up here. Each kid or each group could have their own separate page to put their information on here. And they don't do it in class during class times. Yes, Stamped is a great book to help kids make sense of this. So I could do it on this one Jamboard, but I could also, in a couple different ways, your kids can make their own Jamboards and share them with me. So I could say, okay, Dan, your job, create a Jamboard, make sure you share it with me, but I need you to address this question. Here's your opinion. I know what your opinion is, but I need more information about what your evidence is. And so your synchronous, asynchronous conversation, it can be both and or, all of the above. And that's the beauty for me of what Jamboard gives you, a lot of flexibility. So it could be in class, whether it's face-to-face or remote or a hybrid. If you're flipping half your kids every day, right, which sucks, I get it. But one group could be doing this live. The other group could be doing it, on their own time. And then you come back and flip them. You can shoot this out through your Google Classroom. You could put a link on a Google Sites page or on a WordPress page or whatever you're using to connect with your kids. You can send them a shortened URL. And so Jamboard gives you that flexibility. That's a great question. Synchronous or asynchronous? Both. Either or.
That's great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So I'm teaching, higher ed. I'm teaching a master's class right now with people who are already teachers, right? And so I was thinking about using Jamboard as kind of a form of assessment, a place for them to share their ideas and thoughts. And so this is giving me some ideas about how to do it. And so you can set up a page, and then you can have like 3 layers, right? They do a first page, second page, third page, right? And they add stuff to each page.
Right.
So am I using the right? Are my terms the right page? I'm not saying the right terms.
Well, no, and I call them pages or subboards or extra boards. Google calls them frames. So if I come back in here, you can have up to 20 these little buttons. Every time you click it to the right, you're adding another, what they call frames. And so you can even see all of the frames sort of on a kind of a little frame chart thing. I don't know what you call it. I just call it boards or pages. They call them frames. I don't think it matters one way or the other. But yes, you can add up to 20 frames or subboards for each Jamboard. Most of your classrooms that kids have or the teachers have are going to be more than 20, probably. So maybe you have groups of kids on these subboards, or you have kids create their own, or you have kids go to the front page, 3-dot menu, and make a copy that goes into their Google Drive, and then they can edit that copy. And that's, so if I'm in Google Classroom, for example, and I want to shoot this out to you so you can edit it and add your own evidence, I just shoot this out through Google Classroom and say, as I'm shooting it out, right, make each kid their own copy. And that drops that page into their drive so they can edit.
For social studies educators, I'm really liking the primary source possibilities with this, right? Like interactive. And I love, so you included a historical image in here, right? And so I could really see that, right? Like having a Jamboard with like pictures, where that students go through, they look at each picture individually, and then maybe by the end they're trying to also corroborate, right? Like, what are these pictures? What stories do these primary documents tell together, and what other evidence do we need? And so I could really see like students working their way through that. The other thing I think, Glenn, that this maybe speaks to is so often what we do is we often in schools, we ask every student to do the same thing, right? Yeah. So like every student completes an assignment, right? It's the old model of handing them the worksheet. I really liked kind of thinking a little bit more creatively about what does it mean to create assignments where students see each other's answers, and so the actual process is collaborative and builds on it. And how does that change the questions we ask, right? And I think it means that you have to ask better questions, because if you ask a simple question with a simple answer, when did this happen, who is in the picture or something like that, somebody's going to give you an answer and then you're moving on, right? Like that's not hard. But if you ask a worthwhile question, which I think is a big movement in social studies, right? This whole C3 framework thing is about asking questions that matter. Then now students can actually hopefully like build on each other's answers and learn from each other and figure it out together, right? And so I think there's something more educational, and it kind of pushes us away from asking simple questions.
Right. No, absolutely. And so this is the example of like, I get everybody's feedback, everybody's answers. And we always talk about so this, like all the orange stuff, here's my opinions, but here's the evidence. And we can continue that conversation. The idea of having kids see other kids work and in this sort of virtual remote world, having kids talk with other kids. Having students talk with other students is a powerful learning tool. We talked earlier about how powerful it is for teachers to talk to other teachers about best practice. Well, why don't we have students do the same thing? We need to have students talk to other students about best practice. They're the learning part. We're the teaching part. We want to teach better. We want them to learn better. So yeah, absolutely. Having them talk with each other in this sort of format gives them the ability to have conversations about the learning that they're all doing. And I think that's huge. I
think I'll add one other thing that reminds me of, I don't know if you've read Frank Smith, I think he's in ELA. So I'm stealing some of his ideas from the ELA field, but he has a book called The Book of Learning and Forgetting, which is a tremendous thin little book. I recommend to everyone, where he talks about, we learn in communities and we need to see ourselves as members of the communities. And I think we don't focus on that enough, that students need to see themselves as part of a group that's doing something, right? And so I think like when we do these collaborative assignments, it doesn't, there's a lot of other factors in schools that will make students feel part of a group or not part of one, right? But if we can be more conscious of that and make students feel like they're part of some kind of a group in the classroom and they're doing stuff together and see their peers as doing it with them, I think that's a step in the right direction.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I just remember when I was, I started this whole conversation today about my first year of teaching, and that's one thing I didn't do for years, is find ways to have kids talk with other kids, to have conversation in small groups and have rovers move from one group to the next and share different groups' ideas and big poster paper. And I think this one, you can see at the top, is actually a virtual big paper. In a face-to-face setting, we put up those big sticky notes and have kids write, and then we do gallery walks and walk around, and all those different ways of having kids talk with other kids. I never did that until I had some really smart teachers, kind of slap my wrists a little bit and say, you suck, you need to do better. And here's some ways that you can do that. I will say this before I forget, Jamboard's still relatively new in the Google stable of tools. And Google has a habit of just like throwing stuff out there, see if people like it, and then change it. There you go. Over 4 years ago. Nice.
It was announced then, so I don't know if it's actually been highly in use since 2016, but that's the information I was able to find on that.
Well, so first of all, it was part of Google, and I don't know if they're going to keep this. I don't see this happening. Maybe they're going to do better, but this software is part of a hardware rollout, like a big actual whiteboard that you have in your room that you roll around or you hang on your wall or whatever, right? It's like, I don't know, $6,000 or $7,000, $8,000. Schools aren't going to buy those when I can do it on a screen like this. I don't know. Anyway, it's both for business and schools. I get that. Anyway, they roll these things out and then they add to, like, they make them better as they age, right? We're going to add more tools. Like Google Classroom was like really bare bones when it came out. And then they added more and more and more and more cool stuff to make it more powerful and useful. And I think Jamboard's going to do the same thing. Yes. Google Expeditions, by the way, they're killing that in a couple months. Like, what the heck? Anyway, off topic. I've learned to deal with that pain. Jamboard, here's what it does not have, that things like Google Doc, Google Slides, Google Spreadsheet have, which is that version history. So here's the thing, a Jamboard like this, I can create and I can invite specific people to edit or view it. I can open it up to everybody to edit or view it, right? So I have different levels, just like Google Documents, so that I can have people on either looking at it or having the rights to change it. There's no version history here. So I taught middle school for a long time, and no offense to all the middle school kids who are listening to this. You guys are punks. I know that you're going to want to change some of you're going to go in there and add a bad word or put a dirty joke in there or add a photograph or delete somebody's sticky note, right? There's just going to be kids who do stupid stuff. I get that. Here's the problem. No version history. Dan, I don't know if it was you or somebody else. So be aware that in this sort of setting, so I'm going to do this for like 15 minutes. Kids, put your questions, your evidence, and your opinions on the Jamboard. At the end of the hour, I'm going to go up to my share button. I'm going to share view only. So now it's locked. So be aware of that if you leave this sort of like open, whoever you gave, like if the whole world has access to this, including your 13-year-olds, chances are it's not going to look the same when you come back to it. So lock it when you're done with it, and let kids have access to their own boards to do their own work without having access to everybody else's. Just a little tip.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful because I do rely on the version history sometimes when I do collaborative stuff. In a class, I'll often open up a Google Doc, just make it accessible. That's a challenge too, right? Because sometimes I want to make it as accessible as possible so I don't require logins. I just give everyone the link, and then all you've got is that a rhinoceros deleted somebody else's line. And you don't know. Rhinoceros, deleted the sloth's terms, and you don't know who did it. But so that is very helpful to know. And so, yeah, it's a good thing to think about is, do you want this to be an individual assignment or do you want it to be a group assignment? And what are the pluses and negatives on each of those?
I think they're going to add the version history eventually. Probably. I don't know. And maybe they're going to just quit supporting this particular tool too. But while it's here, let's take advantage of it. And if you're a social studies teacher or even, a non-social studies person, you're going to do stuff like this as science, language arts. I mean, you can put shapes that are transparent, have different colors. And this is a screenshot, so I can't drag it over here. But the idea that I can, as a student, source an image or document by dragging these shapes over the top of that particular version. I'm going to see if I can go back to it. I might have it here somewhere. I've got so much stuff turned on. Well, here's another example. Same idea, right? So you can be very specific about telling kids, use these green, red, and yellow shapes to do these specific things. To analyze evidence, to analyze sources. So all of these shapes, I can move, copy, change, whatever, right? So I can have kids.
By the way, I like the focus you had there though too, because a big thing I talk in social, this is just total tangent, Glenn, but a big focus I have in a lot of my classes is that when we talk about civil rights movements over time, whether it's the one we often call the civil rights movement, the 1950s and 60s Black civil rights movement, or other civil rights movements, we often focus on the group fighting for civil rights, and we don't often give a lot of attention and think about the people who are trying to limit civil rights and how did they come to that view, right? And I think understanding the oppressors is so important. And so I like that you're asking questions about the oppressors in that case. Who are these people? Why do they believe, we know what the right thing is right now, like it's civil rights, it's easy to say it now. But these people had deeply held beliefs that there should be segregation and Jim Crow in society. So anyway, I really always appreciate that focus, like taking sometimes the focus. Let's talk about Rosa Parks, of course, but let's also talk about the bus driver. Let's talk about the policeman who enforced the law, the white supremacist laws at that time period. That's it. Sorry, Taylor.
No, and it's a good point. If you're a social studies teacher out there, those are the kinds of questions we want kids to think about. Civil rights is a nuanced sort of thing, ongoing.
And that's
Everything.
the uncomfortable stuff. That's the harder. I think in many ways that's harder to talk about, right? Because it's easy to talk about the stuff that we tend to quote unquote agree with now. I always say civil rights is, a lot of people like their civil rights in the past, right? And so when we think about the difficult stuff, I think that challenges us to really think about it more honestly.
Well, and I'm definitely not the expert on Holocaust education. Yesterday was Holocaust Remembrance Day, right? And so I do know that when we talk about the Holocaust, which is obviously very nuanced and very difficult and very painful and very powerful, we talk about not just the victims. We talk about the perpetrators and the bystanders. So who are the people in the background behind those cars? Are those journalists? Are those people from Selma, Alabama, just coming out to watch the violence? Are they supporters of John Lewis and his group? Or are they supporters of the police and their group? So talking about those other people in the image, we focus on John Lewis, and who is a national hero, by the way, right? But you're right. We need to have these different sorts of conversations that place those events in a better perspective. So I just think Jamboard can do so many things. This is just a simple word sort, for example. We have kids do word sorts face to face with pieces of paper or sticky notes or, index cards or whatever. This is just a simple word sort that kids could do on Jamboard.
So,
excuse me.
It's okay. So tell me, how would they do this? What do you have them doing with this word sort that you have pulled up?
So there's a really good exercise called hexagons, and it's just another way to do word sorts. And I'm going to mute myself just for a second. I'll have a better mic next time. So this is the word sorts, and the idea is that in this situation, we want kids to just group things that are alike. So how are these different things connected? So I could say, well, here's a group of people. So this has already been sorted in some ways. So places: Mississippi River, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Richmond, Vicksburg. Those are places. Gettysburg is a place. Or is it a battle? Should we remember it as a battle or a place? Here's another group of people. Here's a group of people. Here's a group of people.
Yeah.
But you could start to do, and I'm going to put in the blog post this afternoon that you guys are all going to go back and read, right? I'll put some links to both the hexagon and word sort activities. I love this idea of forcing kids, encouraging kids is maybe a better word, to make connections between people, places, ideas, and events. This is a really good activity to solidify the content knowledge, the basic foundation stuff that we're going to talk about. And when we can see kids making connections between these things, then that's a formative assessment that proves to me that they know what they're doing. But the cool thing,
there's not a right answer here, right? I mean, you could group these. I mean, this is like the historian's work, right? I always remember my doctoral advisor. He always said research was like, basically you have like all the sand on the beach, and your job is to organize piles of it. You can't get all the sand. You're going to have to pick some piles, organize it, and figure out where they go. And this is kind of like that, right? And there's many different ways. Like, for example, we could organize this around concepts of racism or place geography or history or chronology, or right. There's so many different ways to think of it.
So when you start to think about this, one of the things that not only can we group them into like people, places, ideas, and events, very basic, right? Depth of knowledge, level 1, Bloom's taxonomy down at the bottom. But when we start to ask kids to group them and make connections, and then explain those connections, that's the powerful part, where now it becomes not a formative assessment, it becomes a summative assessment. Why did you connect these things together in the way that you did? What's the evidence that suggests that Copperheads has a connection with Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, and racism? Emancipation Proclamation could be in here.
And I love even talking about the concept of racism or white supremacy, right? Then all of a sudden you have to figure out where to group Abraham Lincoln. Now now you're getting into some historical details. And I'm already envisioning, and this is what I love about playing with tech and seeing the way other people do it, because I'm envisioning the beginning of a unit where I have these key terms and have students, this is like a prior knowledge. Okay, so look at these terms. We're about to explore this. Then at your end summative thing is you could give them back the same thing, say group them and write me an essay using these terms, right? And so that could be a really, really cool way to have some continuity across your entire unit.
So you could have, again, this is a language arts ones for those of you who are out there, language arts or ELA. I mean, we could start to draw the lines and connect things back and forth in, all sorts of ways. Kids are going to be able to think about better ways maybe than I can to create those connections and those visual sorts of things. Just drag the sticky notes. Well, this kid goes, no, I want to do it like this. Is that okay? And I'm going to go, yep, there's no right or wrong answer. If it makes sense to you, absolutely do it that way. And so this just gives you a lot of flexibility as the teacher to do that summative, informative assessment in lots of different ways. I just love this idea of just dragging stuff around and having conversations about it. And then what happens is if I have, again, these same sticky notes on 6 or 7 of these sub pages, right? These frames that Google calls them. If now we're done, go look at everybody else's. How is yours different and the same? How did your group organize these sticky notes the same and different than everybody else? So it's just another way to have kids talk with other kids about, oh my gosh, Dan, we did not think about this. Holy crap, did you see page 3? Go quick, take a look at page 3, because we did not. We probably need to change our group. Our the way we organized. And that's what I was even imagining. Cool.
You know what I was imagining from this is that if you did this throughout, like I could see end of a unit where you're like actually making a table of contents of your history book, right? Like, so like I'm going to write a history of this time period. And then what students' challenges is to write the table of contents and explain why it's organized the way it is, right? So they could make their cover, they can make I'm just thinking like it would be easy to do it with this setup. And again, you start playing with this stuff, you come up with different ideas. I never would have thought of that except for when I see all these terms, I'm starting to imagine like, history books I've read recently where they had to organize like the events. And I'm like, oh, that's what historians do. So
you can use this as like you said, a kid could, like, you got a big paper or a big project. This is a planning tool just for the kid. They can include you. They can share it just specifically to you as the teacher. And then you can have that sort of conversation via this sticky note text. Have you thought about organizing it this way? What's your research? What's the rationale? And rather than having, an hour and a half Zoom call for your class, the kids are just spending that time doing their work, and you're just jumping in and out of their different pages, giving them advice. I love the idea. Zoom breakout rooms are awesome when they're used correctly, right? So I drop kids in there, and one of the things I know that teachers, they're just in there wasting time. How do I know? And so you got to jump in and monitor use a Jamboard. Here's page 1. Is the guiding prompt of what you're supposed to be doing in your breakout room. Make sub pages for each of your groups. Each of your groups is now responsible to go to that sub page and use Jamboard to document the conversation that's happening. Somebody's a recorder, or you can set this up in lots of different ways. So instead of dropping into the breakout rooms, you're just in your Jamboard, flipping through the pages, watching the conversation happen. By the documentation that they leave. You can drop in questions. You can have you thought about this? Here's a photograph. Have you thought about this photograph as a piece of evidence? Rather than trying to, I know you could do this on a Google Doc too, but then it's just more jumbled together, I think. And that's why I give each breakout room their own subpage in your Jamboard. And then you're just going from one page to the next page, to the next page, group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. It's just another way to track the conversation and make kids accountable.
Yeah, I like it. And I think, I think in giving kids, kind of a bounded space and inspiring them is always a better approach than if you feel the need, you have to, track your kids, monitor them constantly. Like sometimes, and I get it. Kids are at different ages. They're playful and fun and they're going to always, I was like that, right? Like they're going to always rebel a little bit here and there, but trying to figure out how you can capture their attention, give them tasks that they find interesting is always a good way. Well, I think we're a little over an hour now. Having said that, that's subtracting out the first 20 minutes or so of tech problems. But this is our first attempt to do this. I'm going to go down. I'll go into the YouTube video and try to edit out until you kind of started talking a little bit, and I'll add some notes into the description to explain what happened there. But I really enjoyed learning about Jamboard from you. And so I want to remind people to go to your site, glennwiebe.org, which will redirect you over to historytech.wordpress.com. And make sure to follow Glenn on Twitter at GlennW98. Anything else you want to share about any of the work that you're doing?
No, I only can do this because there's really smart teachers out there who are doing a very difficult job. So kudos to everybody who is a K-12 teacher of any kind, because your job is incredibly hard. And if this helps make your life a little easier, awesome. That's the goal. Thanks for all you're doing. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm Dan Krutke, and I think our hope is to do this. I created a graphic for this that I was really proud of. I want to use it more than once. So, I'm
a little concerned, Dan, that you have me with a sport coat on or a jacket on. It's like I don't remember the last time I actually did that. So I don't know where you found that image. It's a good picture, I guess, but it's not a very accurate depiction. But
you know what?
You keep it.
Glenn, this is a product of what shows up in search when I search Glenn Wiebe. That's actually was like the best, most high quality picture. And I was gonna do a VHS over kind of like an edit of it, filter of it, but it got. I was getting a little bit too I think creative there. But
I'm good.
But I appreciate having you on. I think what we're gonna try to do is maybe do these and talk about some different tech and show each other. And I love it. This is great for me, and I'm gonna use some of this. I know in my teaching here in the near future.
Awesome.
So thanks for joining. I'll edit this video down, and we'll get another one scheduled, and hopefully some people can join us and we won't have tech problems.
Fingers crossed, everybody. It's going to be great.
All right. Thanks, Glenn.